Good afternoon, listeners. Tony Pellegrini here with Teaching and Learning at Southern Utah University. We're tickled to have you listen in today as I pose a few questions to Brandon Wiggins from our physics department. Brandon, would you be willing to take a moment or two and tell a little about your background, a little about your history, why you're so tickled to be here teaching at SUU?
Sure. So I went to SUU, I guess, as an undergraduate, and so that's one of the reasons, at least, why I was absolutely thrilled at the opportunity to being able to come back. So I did my undergraduate here, went off and did grad school. Part of that was at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where I did some computational astrophysics, which is just doing physics inside of a computer, and now I'm here teaching at Southern Utah University. So that's kind of me.
That is exciting. That is very, very exciting. And I know that you've had we're recognizing and honoring you for your, outstanding educator position or award that you've won. And we're just tickled to be able to find out, to steal some great ideas from you and encourage some learners to come to your class and sign up for your classes because of the great activities that you have been involved in. Would you take a moment or two, talk to us a little bit about what made you decide to become a teacher? Why did you want to get away from that physics inside of a computer?
Well, the good news about being a professor is you don't have to get, I guess, all the way away from that type of thing. You still get to keep your research a little bit, but it was a deliberate choice, to go to an institution that's primarily a teaching institution and not maybe a research-based institution. I've had opportunities to go to bigger institutions. And what you see there, of course, as everyone knows, is the student body is vast enough that you kind of have to treat students as populations rather than as people, and so I love being here. I actually knew I was going to be a teacher as early as kindergarten. My grandpa was a professor of geology, and he inspired me that early. It was decided by kindergarten, so been planning for a little while, I guess.
That is wonderful. I loved your concept there of teaching people and not necessarily populations. That sounds a little bit like a teaching philosophy. Do you have a teaching philosophy that you follow? Would you be willing to share that with us?
Sure, and I'll say that first of all, I don't know that mine's the best, right? I'm sure it could be fine to do.
It works for you though, right?
It works, yeah. So I mean, I guess I could state mine probably in three different ways, but I suppose I'm saying the same thing each time. But probably the best way to say this is I think I'd like to teach the class that I would want to take. And that's something that I think is very easy to forget to do because a lot of us have learning outcomes we're trying to hit, and there's outcomes that on the back end of all of this that we feel obligated to reach. But that's kind of been my guiding philosophy: teach the class that you'd want to take. I guess another piece of that is I try to meet my students on sort of their own terms, and that's important to me.
I think that is very, from my perspective, very, very profound and very telling. Meeting students on their own terms. I'm not a physics professor, and the content knowledge that you have about how our world and universe works is profound. But yes, absolutely, humans are a part of that. Students are a part of that. Faculty is a part of that. But we really have emotions that maybe physics doesn't really have those emotions. How do you deal or come from a physical world to a social emotional world where you're working with human students and trying to help them learn the lessons that you want them to learn? How do you go about doing that?
That's a good question. A lot of it is, I think, I mean, I don't know. There's a famous TED speaker. I think everyone's seen it. Ken Robinson speaks a little bit. I've spoken a couple of times at some TED conferences, and privately, he's written a little bit about how he teaches and how he, I guess, starts a class. And I love his way of doing this. Essentially, what he says is, I walk into a room, and the first thing I try to do, the first objective before content, before anything, is I try to make a connection with my students. And he said, I have to feel around a little bit. So that can take 2 minutes. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes. But he said, I know that nothing useful is done until after that connection is made. Um, I don't know if that's true or not, but I found that to be true of my experience. We all know, I think, as professors, what that feels like when we've made a meaningful connection with our students. I think that's sort of the way I would answer that question. I honestly look up to the students that I teach. They're incredibly busy people. They're balancing a bunch of different obligations, and they're doing so rather masterfully. There's certainly more expectations on their time than there were even the short time ago that I was in college. And I think that connection is actually what makes, anyway, that's first of all what makes teaching worthwhile, but I also think it makes it very effective.
I really love that perspective, that that connecting with your students, to find some way that we can speak the same language, or have the same passions. Um, can you talk to us for a moment or two about how those connections, once you've made those, how do you use those to really help you to check with those students, those incredibly brilliant and busy learners that you have, to make sure that they're understanding what you're teaching? They're connecting not only to you, but to your content. What are some of the ways and approaches that you use to check that, or check for that student understanding?
I think there's a couple of ways. I think it all sort of revolves around sort of frequent, low stakes quizzing that doesn't need to be mean or vindictive or scary. But throughout class, there's opportunities, as most professors have, to participate. I pose questions that are that turn into discussions, right? Riddles, if you like, that hopefully tickle their curiosity, but also help them try to connect concepts together. And you can get a fairly good gauge of student command of the subject through those discussions. But yeah, I'm not afraid to quiz frequently either, and at very low stakes. I think that there's an illusion of knowing that kind of sets in when a professor makes this all seem very clear. I don't know if I used to feel this when I was in the classroom. It would all seem so clear in the classroom, when you go home by yourself and try to do the homework, and it wouldn't be clear. And the sooner you can have students fail, the sooner, of course, they'll succeed. We have a little saying in our class that we fail early to succeed sooner, which I'm sure we've borrowed from someplace else. But I try to set up those moments of realization, I guess, as early as possible, in lecture if possible, or frequently outside of class on Canvas or whatever the case may be.
That is very, very appropriate. That, that low stakes question. I'm an old ESL teacher, and I really do believe that all learning is second language learning, and that we are emotional human beings, and if those emotions rise, then it really stops that communication or that connection. And I love the fact that you have these low stake formative assessments, quizzes, that we can, it's okay to fail on those. How do you move it to the next step to assess your student progress more in a summative way? What are some of the approaches or activities that you use to move from a low stakes formative assessment to more of a higher stakes summative assessment, while not really scaring your students away?
There's going to be a little bit of terror. I think I don't know how to get
You just
that.
have to say physics
To
to me,
wiggle
and it
that
creates the terror.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's also the thing. I think in our classroom we all have the posture that it's all of us against physics. I think, and that physics is kind of this outside scary thing. But the way I think that, I'm not doing anything too novel here. I think every professor tries to do this as well. Very clear expectations, right, on what students should be gaining command of. Half of the struggle, I've taken courses where there's been unhelpful difficulties in maybe the course design not being quite as organized as maybe I would have liked as a student, or not really knowing what was important to the professor. And so now coming back as one, of course, that's one of the things I hit very hard, exactly what it is that I want students to learn. And then testing on that. Yeah, we have a full day. I know this is unusual for my types of classes, physics classes, but we have full days where we would just review for exams. We try to bring a bunch of different concepts together and hopefully put them together in a holistic way. As far as the summative assessments go, I'm also one of those sticklers right now for, I still do written exams. I don't do multiple choice still, and it's murdering me as far as
Oh, bad. As far as
time
time,
goes,
oh my
right?
goodness.
But the idea is, I mean, the idea that a professor would take the time for my papers when I was coming here as a student and would write comments in the margins or what have you. That was, I still have tests, assessments for my undergraduate years, because not only were they informative, but they meant something to me that the professor would take that time. And so my feedback on those tests, which again, they're workout style tests. I grade every line of work. I tell my students, I don't have a key when I start grading your tests. I'm looking for the correct process, the way you're thinking. And that's the kind of the granular level that I'm grading at. But anyway, I feel I owe that to the students in a way. If they've prepared themselves to show me a complete process, I should be ready to give feedback on that complete process and reward them for command of that process. So I haven't found a way around that yet. So
I think it's wonderful that you've had that absolutely modeled for you by SU professors, and you're contributing now that to future, maybe future SU professors. I think that's wonderful. And I've sensed I want to take a little bit of different tack to change the tack just a little bit here, but have really heard in your voice your passion for teaching here at SU. Can you talk to us for a moment or two about that love or that passion for teaching here at SU? You've had opportunities, like you said, to go other places, more research-based. What really instills that passion in you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm legitimately, so here's a couple of things. The first thing is, I should ask you, professor, that said this once, and I think it was true of physics too. I'm just making the connection now as I'm talking, but one of the things that I assume is that no one wants to learn physics, right? My class is sort of a physics for people who hate physics class. And I kind of approached on that level. Everyone's taking this because they have to take a test, a standardized test usually to get into medical school, or because their major requires it or what have you. And so a lot of them are not coming to me because of inherent passion for the subject. And so it's kind of, I don't know, my philosophy has been that there are places that you can go where you can lock yourself in your office all day and do research. That's really is a possibility for everyone that works at SUU. You can do that. But the reality is you know, we're all giving that up, and we're giving that up because we want to influence people in a classroom. So we might as well pull out all the stops, as they say, and make this experience a good one. I firmly believe my students changed my life, and my deepest aspiration is to maybe in some small way influence these students' lives. If not with the love of learning or love of physics, just with that general curiosity about the natural world, I suppose. This is what makes life exciting for me. That my fascination with the natural world, and I think that's the way we should teach. We all got into our fields because we love them, and it's just a matter of finding a way to communicate that. I don't know where it comes from exactly. Maybe it's too much Dr. Pepper. That's probably the correct
I'm not
answer.
going to try to steer you away from that. I'm not going to try to steer you away from that. Brandon, just one last question for you to consider, please. You know, you've mentioned that you get to work with students who don't have maybe a very deep passion for for physics. And so I'm sure you have a wide variety, a wide continuum of learners with understanding and background and knowledge and skills. At one end of that, certainly from time to time, you may have had, pardon me, a referral from the Disability Resource Center. How do you try to meet the needs of learners that maybe are at that end of the scale, that are challenged in those ways?
I've had the opportunity, as all of us have. I've had the opportunity to do that. And by the way, some of the coolest experiences that I've had as a professor have been working with these particular students. There's some really good opportunities for a professor to really augment someone's life. There was one particular student that I had who was formerly dyslexic, so much so that simply reading the problem alone was an issue, and then trying to construct a coherent calculation was a real struggle. Perhaps my optimism with teaching, say, physics is that everyone thinks like a physicist. It's just physicists often call these things different things. Everyone can balance a budget. In physics, we balance energy. We make sure no energy is spent. All the energy is accounted for, all the momentum is accounted for. And so after hours, and this is nothing too noble, we professors do this all the time. Outside of office hours, I met with a student and we would work problems on a whiteboard. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had as a professor, seeing this kid gain this confidence that even though he had this disability that was holding him back, it wasn't holding him back. And in fact, the things we were talking about were actually very conceptually simple, and there were things within his grasp. And seeing him put those all together was very rewarding. I do have the philosophy that we sometimes can get caught up teaching classes, and I do this as well. I think we get pulled into the world of, I'm going to put effort into my course. But what makes SU special to me is that everyone here puts effort into people. They put effort into these students almost on a one-by-one basis. And I think that's what's in our secret sauce here.
It is delicious, isn't it, Brandon? Brandon, our time is up. Do you have any questions that I haven't asked you, or anything that you'd like to share, or that I haven't hit on that you really would like to share with our listeners?
No, I've just been thrilled to be here, and it's been an absolute honor to be a part of the podcast. Thanks so much, Tony.
You are very, very welcome. I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for your work. Friends, or student friends, I hope you'd consider taking one of Brandon's classes, and peers, faculty peers. I hope you'd consider reaching out to Brandon and hanging out with him, or in his classes sometimes, to see how he puts these activities into practice. Brandon, you've been a delight. I appreciate you, and look forward to learning more about you in the future.
Hey, thanks so much, Tony.
Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye now.